Welcome to Abstract Audio, the podcast presenting life as an abstract art form. The show that encourages you to perceive beyond the tangible, to extract the infinite from the finite, to see with the mind what you cannot physically see with the eyes. Oh, it's an emancipation. It's an exploration into areas usually overlooked. Explore with me on today's episode. What up, yo? Welcome back to the Abstract Audio Show, where we're in wonderful, awkwardly meet for coffee. Glad you guys can make it. I'm Amber Janae, your host and metaphorical barista. Here every other week, serving you up a hot, fresh, and delicious brew of ideas. So let's stir it up, shall we? Oh, and feel free to tip. All right, friends. So last episode, we basically dipped our little thoughty muscatis into the idea of privacy. Most of y'all really fuck with that episode, and I can see why. It spoke to such sensitive subjects in our society, ones we're all still kind of on edge about, like the election that just passed. It's like everyone's in sort of a weird place when it comes to privacy. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. Because it's a clear, unregulated paradox. Like, they say we're free, but they're watching, listening, distracting, and manipulating everything we do. And even though the purpose of this pod is to essentially lift the veil, on these kinds of topics, I don't want to freak y'all out too much, more than you already are. Halloween's over, the election's over. I'm sure you've got your fair share of frights already. Yeah, I'm sure you and your friends, you just finished hitting up all of the haunted houses and the scary movies together and all that. Or you sat at home and watched the deterioration of this country from your couch. Also just as scary. But when you really think about it, friends are the only people you really feel comfortable possibly invading that privacy bubble, right? So that got me thinking, what even makes someone a good friend, And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So let's start today's episode with a little thought experiment, shall we? So imagine if we all just suddenly woke up tomorrow with zero social expectations, no text to return, no brunch plans, no happy hours to hit up. Okay, how many of us would actually feel relieved? I mean, don't be shy. You can tell the truth here. This is a safe space. Now, don't get me wrong. Friendships can be, rare, priceless treasures, sure. But when we strip away the corny BFF bracelets and the stale-ass let's keep in touch yearbook promises, we're kind of just left with a question that might sound uncomfortable, almost cynical. But do we really need friends? And maybe, more importantly, do they need us? So that's our topic for today, friends. And take this all with a grain of salt, because I have none. And for those who just flinched, hold on. Before you correctly write me off as an antisocial pessimist, how about we dive a little deeper into the messy, complicated world of friendship? Because whether we want to admit it or not, the nature of friendship is really complex. And we're all about the weird and complex here, right? I mean, I'm a woman, and I've never really been particularly popular. So my perception may be a bit skewed here, like I said, but whichever way you slice it, it seems to always come down to like two categories for female friendships anyway. It either ends up being about validation, or sometimes it's about competition, or emulation. I mean, sometimes friendship can be this cozy safety net, and other times it's a high wire balancing act. But regardless of what friendship does or doesn't offer us, Society places this invisible weight on it, as another must-have in the social catalog. Like it's a new iPhone we need to grab as soon as it's released. And I don't like that. I don't like being told what to need. I mean, just look at the lengths we go to maintain friendships. The effort and investment can feel like an emotional gym membership. Some of us are there daily, texting, calling, tweeting, tagging, planning, and emotionally bench pressing our way to keep our friendships thriving. While others, they're more the canceled gym membership types, the ones who show up every once in a blue moon only to vanish without a trace for months. And let's be real, the older you get, friendships start to require more flexibility than yoga classes. We morph into therapists, life coaches, cheerleaders, and sometimes, the occasional stand-up comedian. All for the sake of staying close, for saying we have that. And hear me out here, it's great and all, but that's a ton of extra stuff on top of your own ton of stuff you have going on. Okay, not to make it seem like it's all bad though, friends can be anything from comforting confidants, to brutal critics. It's great, that they challenge us, sure. And they also kind of validate us. 1 minute they're calling you out and the next they're the only ones who truly get what you're going through. But do they only get it because we put them in that position? It's like a bizarre paradox that's hard to navigate because, let's face it, friends are like jeans, right? Jeans. If you find good ones, they fit just right and push us outside our comfort zone. Your favorite pair of jeans make you feel seen, right? Good. And when you think about the categories of friendship, our preferences tend to group us into either introverts or extroverts. We talked about it a little bit last episode, Introverts with their love of solitude and their selective nature, their strong preference for me time. They're almost like the anti-heroes in the friendship story, They have fewer friends, but they tend to build deep, meaningful connections, when they do venture out. While extroverts, on the other hand, are like, let's do everything together types, thriving in groups and bouncing from one social setting to the next. Man, I'm getting tired just thinking about it. But that introvert-extrovert dynamic kind of speaks volumes about how we approach friendship, right? So which is better? You could argue that introverts' a selective, minimalist approach to friendship is overall more sustainable, right? Fewer friends, deeper bonds, less drama, healthier in the long run, I guess. They're not constantly running around trying to keep up with everybody, and they often have that strong sense of self, While other people could say that extroverts, with their social fluidity, contribute more to society by building those networks and forming communities. But maybe it's less about better and more about balance. Like introverts like me avoid unnecessary drama and stuff, extra shit, but always are at a risk of isolation. And extroverts bring people in, but risk spreading themselves really thin. It's like pick your poison. And speaking of balance, let's get philosophical for a second. That's always fun. Like it's pretty widely accepted that friendships are good for us, but are they actually good for us or just good for society? I mean, sure, friendships create social bonds and cohesion, yeah. But do they really improve our individual lives, or are they more so fulfilling a social expectation? I mean, friendships can be life-saving, sure. They give us support and a sense of community, but they can also be so draining, demanding and a lot of times toxic. So are friendships essential, Or are they just another cog in a social machine? Well, maybe, guys, maybe we're not even that complicated when it comes to why we keep friends around. Sometimes friendships are just about that validation, and safety. Safer in groups, safety in numbers. And they push us to grow, giving us that tough love, holding up a mirror to our worst traits. But more often, they're really just confirming what we want to believe about ourselves, I've found. Kind of like a buffer against our insecurities. If you think about it, we might be clinging to people who simply echo our quirks, validating our insecurities and reinforcing our worldview. It's kind of like we were talking about a few episodes back, in the circle and the people you attract. Look, validation isn't inherently bad. Sometimes it's all we need to get through a rough day or feel less alone in our weirdness. But when the balance tips, you get to thinking, is it cynical to think our closest friends may validate our worst tendencies instead of inspiring our best? Hey, maybe that's just part of the friendship game. I don't know. But it sure feels like a game. And speaking of validation, here's a topic that tends to stir the pot. Platonic friendships between men and women. Oh boy. Does society love the idea that they're just natural, possible, normal? But let's be real. It's complicated. Whether we like it or not, attraction tends to seep into those platonic friendships, which makes things awkward, to say the least. Especially when one side wants more, and they always do. People often approach opposite sex friendships with hella different intentions, And because of social conditioning and biology, that line between just friends and something more can very easily blur. Maybe these friendships are just another mirror, reflecting desires we might not fully want to confront. Think about it. And speaking of mirrors, we just talked about the attraction angle. And a few of our other topics recently, like ownership, entitlement, they all tie back to the same human need to hold on to things that feel like ours. Sometimes we view friendships as personal trophies, proof of our value. Think of our significant others, you call them a trophy wife, for God's sakes. And if we're not careful, we can start treating people like extensions of our ego rather than individuals with their own desires and boundaries. We attract people into our lives with the best intention most times. But over time, it's easy to fall into patterns of expectation and ownership, all this. We start believing that because someone is our friend, they owe us loyalty, presence, or even energy. Maybe real friendship, the kind that actually enriches our lives, is really about appreciating people for who they are, not what they can give us or show us. But that's easier said than done, isn't it? Kind of the same ending either way. Considering the seemingly transactional nature of things nowadays, like I said, what even makes a good friend? It's different for everybody. But friendship's complexities go deeper, when we consider that social conditioning. Society pushes this idea that more friends means more success. And I guess on the networking end, but if we're collecting people just to avoid loneliness, are they real friends or placeholders? You could have thousands of friends on social media, but when things go south, who is gonna genuinely show up? That, oh, we should catch up soon crowd, that, oh, how the kids crowd. Ghosts. But then there's those friendships that actually stand the test of time and contribute to who we become. People talk about how love changes us all the time, but that's the kind of love. That true friendship can be just as transformational. Friends who push us to be better, who don't just nod and go along with the bullshit, Those friends who call us out when we need it And man, maybe friendship at its best is a space for challenge and growth. At its worst, a mirror for our insecurities, with just enough validation to avoid that self-reflection. So at the end of the day, guys, do we really need friends? Of course, don't be stupid. Society would collapse without connection, and we lose the joy that comes from being truly understood by people outside of our immediate family. But sometimes it's worth questioning whether the need for friendship is as crucial as we're told to believe, or if it's just another social construct that's been elevated to a must-have. You know what I'm saying? And maybe the real question isn't whether we need friends, but whether we just need people. Somebody to talk to, somebody to laugh with, someone to validate our existence, even if only for a brief moment. Friendship might just be a label we slap on people who fill specific needs in the moment for us. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. You know, humans are social creatures, like I've always said. And we do thrive on connection, but calling everybody a friend might just be society's way of making us feel more connected than we actually are. Because real, genuine connection is dwindling in front of our eyes. It is. Look around. True friendship is actually super rare. And I guess that's just something we gotta be okay with. You know what else is pretty okay? This podcast, if I do say so myself. So be sure to comment, subscribe, and share if you want to see more of it. I mean, you know, if you don't want to see it, don't watch it, but we are nearing the end of season 2, so be sure you lock in for exclusive content. And remember, always appreciate the abstract in your life.